PS4 has 8 frames of lag natively outside of playing online. So offline, it has roughly 8 frames of lag. Street Fighter on PC has 4 frames of lag. So it's the same as Street Fighter 4. It would have never occurred to me that having an extra 4 frames of lag would make so much of a difference.
This statement by Zangief player Snake Eyes was seen by many as an excuse for his lack of performance so far in competitive Street Fighter V, and the term 8 frame has now turned into a meme of sorts. In the world of competition, excuses are seen as poison, and players aren't really allowed to say anything other than,
"I promise, I won't fail again."
Smash players have even coined the term no Johns, roughly meaning no excuses, because apparently someone named John made a lot of excuses. While labels like these are useful to instantly thwart blame shifting, it can also make it difficult to have an actual conversation, as Ted Cruz will tell you.
Once again, Lion Ted! Well, sir.
So at the risk of getting called Core 8 Gaming, I'm going to talk about these 8 frames or approximately 133 milliseconds of lag. To really understand the implications of 8 frames, I think it's important to put it in a larger context and start from the moment the player reacts until we see the game register an input on the screen. I never thought it would happen, but this might be my first reaction video.
We are excited to announce React World.
If you Google human reaction time, it pulls up the results of backyardbrains.com that claims the average reaction time for a visual stimulus is 250 milliseconds and 170 milliseconds for audio. They used the tried and true ruler experiment, but for the sake of this video, I wanted something more relevant, like an actual gamer reacting to Chun-Li by pressing a button on an arcade stick. So I decided to test myself and my equipment. I reacted to another person randomly jabbing with Chun-Li. My stick was unplugged because I just wanted to measure the time it took for me to notice an attack and press a button. My average reaction time from seeing and hearing Chun-Li's jab to pressing a button was 147 milliseconds. It should be noted that I had a cup of coffee, some organic Earl Grey tea, and half of this Taiwanese awesome black tea, which was awesome. With the human element out of the way, the next step was to find out how much lag my controller produced. But measuring controller lag with any meaningful precision is probably one of the hardest things to do because the game can only register inputs in 1-frame increments. However, by doing thousands of trials and averaging out the numbers, you can see which controllers are faster. And luckily for us, Teya.net has already done this with a ton of different controllers using a sound methodology. My controller uses a Brook PCB that introduces 4.3 milliseconds of lag, and according to stickmaker Laugh, controller lag doesn't become a problem until it's more than 8 milliseconds or half a frame. Now that we have the measurements of the player and the controller, we have to see how much lag the actual game has after receiving a signal from the controller. For this, we need not look further than Forwood, a competitive player that runs a website called displaylag.com and is largely responsible for bringing this topic to the forefront. By using a device called the XIM4, he found that the lag was around 7.9 frames or 131 milliseconds, which is where the 8 frames figure comes from. But Forwood said he adds 10 milliseconds of monitor lag to get his figures, so we'll subtract that to get a pure game lag rating, which would be 121 milliseconds or 7.3 frames. So the next thing to measure is the monitor lag, which can also be found on displaylag.com, but unfortunately this isn't so simple either. According to the site, LCD and LED monitors do not display each consecutive frame at once. Each new frame starts to appear at the top and goes to the bottom. To test out this claim, I made a video of 90s boy band Ken flickering on and off, which looked like this to the naked eye. Then I recorded this being played back on my monitor at 1000 frames per second and slowed it down by 40 times. It looks like this. Each new frame actually looks like some crappy PowerPoint transition. Here's what gameplay looks like slowed down. So how do you measure something that changes from top to bottom like this? Apparently the standard is to use a device called the Leo Bodner lag tester. This thing hooks up to the monitor and measures 3 areas of the screen, top, middle, and bottom. The difference in lag between the top and bottom can be an entire frame, which means you are technically seeing updates to your meter a frame later than your health bar. But because it's assumed most people view the middle of the screen most of the time, the top, middle, and bottom are averaged out to get a single figure. So my monitor was measured at 11 milliseconds, which is among the fastest on the market. So now that we have all the numbers, what can all this tell us? For one, Street Fighter V has some of the most input lag in a competitive fighter. If you combine the lag of the controller, game, and monitor, the game itself is creating 89% of the lag. If you compare my scrubby reaction time to the input lag of my entire setup, the setup accounts for 48% of the lag, and if you replace me with your garden variety Evo champ high on energy drinks, we get to the point where the player is reacting faster than an input can even be recognized. So this raises the question, Did Capcom do this on purpose, or do they just suck at programming? Personally, I think it was intentional, and the evidence for this lies in what's known as the overhead attack. Overhead moves are powerful because they're the only non-special move that can hit crouch-blocking characters from the ground. To prevent a move like this from being too powerful, they usually have the longest startup time in the character's moveset so people can block them on reaction. If you look at the average overhead startup frames for Street Fighter V, it's around 22.3 frames, while Street Fighter IV has an average of 19.4 frames. This is a 2.9 frame difference, which almost exactly matches the difference in input lag of 2.8 frames, which effectively compensates for the delay. But if it was intentional, why would they purposely make the game less responsive by introducing lag? I think there are likely many reasons, including technical ones like matching the feel of online and local play, but one theory I have is that they did it to make the game more offensive. It's been no secret that they wanted to emphasize offense with high-risk backdashes, blocked normals taking gray life, and traditionally defensive Guile doing stuff like this. But increased input lag takes it a step further by making it harder to whiff punish and react to dashes and jump-ins, and players that depend on a reactive defensive style play is going to suffer while proactive offense will be rewarded. The Grand Finals at West Coast Warzone 5 kind of illustrated this go ham or go home concept. For the average spectator, it did create a visually more exciting game, but fans of the more footsie-based gameplay were wondering what they just saw. And once again, this isn't something new. Changes to the reactive nature of a game have affected the career of people in other games too, most notably American football. Traditionally, the middle of the field has been seen as a death zone for receivers because things like this could happen. But after officials started to penalize helmet-to-helmet hits more often, the middle of the field has become a much safer place. This change was part of the reason defensive safety Brian Dawkins retired. He felt that players are now in a gray area, meaning there are times a player has to think or pause instead of react. But even here, the obstruction to reactiveness was having to think more, which I'd argue is a more defensible obstruction than artificially induced input lag. If these 8 frames of lag were indeed an intentional game design choice, it seems like a drastic way to force players into a slugfest. As a very offensive player myself, I feel this input lag has actually helped me win more, but I'd rather have a more responsive game. But I don't know, maybe it's not such a big deal. At the end of the day, I'm still having fun with the game. Let me know in the comments if you think this is a serious issue, a giant excuse for people who can't adapt, or something in between. This was Gerald from Core Gaming. Thanks for watching, and subscribe.